Chapter 10, Impending Doom. The giant kin. As he arrives at the new town called Ivalon, Alexis made a beeline for the blacksmith to have his armor fixed. To his amazement, the repairs were so expertly done that it was as if his armor had never even been damaged in the fierce battle against the sea beast. After having his armor repaired by the skilled blacksmith, Alexis took a leisurely stroll through the town, taking in all the details. As he walked, he couldn't help but notice that the town was situated right on the border of Kingdom Pito and shared a vast forest with Kingdom Apate. A sense of anticipation stirred within him as he pondered his next move, contemplating whether he should journey towards Kingdom Apate or set his sights on Kingdom Anim first, which is farther from his current location. While his mind was filled with thoughts of his next destination, Alexis decided to put his plans on hold for the moment and focus on the present. He took a deep breath, taking in the sights and sounds of the bustling town around him, and resolved to make the most of his time there before moving on to his next adventure. Alexis looked around and noted that the design for this town is one from the pre-colonial era. The clothing of the people was made of brightly colored cotton and featured intricate designs that caught his eye. The shirts the people wore were short-sleeved and reached their knees, while their jackets or cloaks were made of bark cloth. Alexis couldn't help but admire the skill and craftsmanship that went into making the garments. He noticed that the cloth was old, but it is well maintained. As he continued to observe the people, he noticed that they wore tight-fitting trousers, and their feet were wrapped in cloth that was tied with strings. Alexis realized that this was likely a practical choice, as the terrain of the area was likely rough and uneven. The people appeared to be friendly and welcoming, but Alexis sensed a reverence for tradition and a strict social hierarchy in the community. After conversing with one of the NPCs, Alexis learned that the leader of the town was Dachu Luntok, a former disciple of Kalanjitan who had abandoned the temple. Instead, Luntok had converted to the teachings of Kagyu Yuhan and had become a disciple of that faith. Despite this change, however, the temple in the town was not as thriving as it could be. Eager to find a new quest, Alexis decided to head to the temple and see what sub-quest he could do for it. Perhaps by offering his services, he could help the temple and its followers prosper, and maybe even earn some special rewards from Kagyu Yuhan in the process. With these thoughts in mind, Alexis set off towards the temple, ready for whatever challenge or opportunity might await him there. Alexis reached Kagyu Yuhan's temple and entered. He noted that this temple is better than the previous ones he had seen. While inside, he was greeted by 3 priests who had been waiting for any believers that would want to renew their faith. The priests were all older men, with long beards and hair that was braided and adorned with gold antique jewelry. Way better dressed than the other priest of Kagyu Yuhan he had seen. The first priest was tall and slender, with piercing brown eyes and a kind smile. He wore a green robe that shimmered in the light, with golden stitching that caught Alexis' eye. Around his neck, he wore a necklace made of small, polished stones, and his staff was adorned with a small, intricately carved figure of a Maya. The second priest was shorter and more robust, with a broad, friendly face and a deep laugh. His robe was a deep shade of purple, with silver embroidery that glimmered in the light. He wore a number of gold bracelets and rings, and his staff was topped with a large, polished stone that seemed to glow with an inner light. The third priest was the oldest of the 3, with a weathered face and a quiet, introspective demeanor. He wore a simple white robe with delicate blue trim and his staff was topped with a carved haribon. Alexis was taken aback by the appearance of the priests. Their finely crafted robes and jewelry seemed out of place in the impoverished kingdom of Pito. He couldn't help but wonder if these three were exploiting the funds of their believers, or if there was a different story behind their attire. Just then, the oldest priest seemed to sense Alexis's thoughts and spoke up. "We are originally from Kingdom Apate," he explained. "This town is located close to the border of our kingdom. Kagyuyuhan is not as popular in Apate as it is here, but we still have a large temple there. When we learned that one of our brothers, the old priest of this temple, had passed away, we decided to come and help out until we could find someone to take his place." The second priest spoke up, a hint of confidence in his voice. "In the event that we are unable to find any suitable candidates from this town, I will be the one to take over as the youngest among us," he declared. Alexis was impressed by the priest's determination and sense of responsibility. Alexis noted to himself that it was the reason for their different appearance and the absence of animal carvings from the second priest because he is the youngest. The priest's staff doesn't have any carved animals at the other temples he visited. Maybe the design of the staff is the symbol of the priest's position in the hierarchy of the temple. He then addresses the three priests. "That is a noble goal, but it must be challenging to run a temple in a place like this." The first priest chimed in, a warm smile on his face. "It is not easy, but we are not alone," he said. "We have the support of our fellow believers and the guidance of Kagyuyuhan to keep us on the right path. And with your help, we can make a difference in the lives of the people here." Alexis felt a surge of respect for the priests and their unwavering faith. He then agreed to help their cause. However, even before the priest tell him what would be his quest for them, a messenger called Tagapagbalatan Angelito entered the temple and announced devastating news. "As a Tagapagbalata, I have the warning to give. There are these beings taller than a tower who come to make us grieve. They ravage, they rampage, they destroy all in their path. Prepare your weapons, fighters, it's time to face their wrath. For the women and the children, it's best to hide and flee. To leave the town and find a safer place to be. These towering beings do not show mercy. What a symbol of a great adversary. So, heed this warning, one and all, and take it to heart. For when the giants come, we must all do our part. To fight and protect our homes, our loved ones, and our kin. Hopefully, we won't face a dire fate that we will never win." The third priest looked at Alexis. "They are here, the beings of legends. The Anakim." Alexis heard a clicking sound and saw a pop-up window in front of him asking him if he wanted to receive the quest of fighting the towering giant, Anakim. He agreed and accepted the quest. Anakim is real beings mentioned in the Old Testament in the Bible. Alexis surmised that they are probably used as inspirations in place of ogres or actual giants in this game. A young Satawadamara entered the temple. He stands over 5'11" tall. He has broad shoulders and a muscular build, honed from years of training as a Satawadamara. His hair is dark and wavy, falling just below his shoulders. His piercing eyes are a deep brown, full of determination and conviction. His nose is straight and strong, giving him a regal appearance. His lips are thin and set in a determined line, rarely giving way to a smile. He wears a suit of shining silver armor that glints in the natural light. The armor is adorned with intricate gold engravings of Kagyuyuhan's sigil. He carries a large sword strapped to his waist, its hilt decorated with precious gems. His movements are precise and measured, indicating a great deal of discipline and training. He carries himself with a sense of purpose, radiating an aura of righteousness and courage. "Hoju," the first priest called. "It's a good thing you came with us from Apate. There were attacks in this town. We need to save them." He ushered him towards Alexis. This is Alexis. He is a Satawa Damara just like you. He can help you defeat the beings. Hoja was a non-player character. He nodded at Alexis as a form of greeting. Let's make haste to save more people. Alexis looked like a child beside Hoja, who is taller. But for this quest, they will be battling against giants, huge beings that will run havoc on everything in their path. As they stepped outside the temple, a young boy approached them. His name was Rabbit, and he introduced himself as Hoja's younger brother. The pungent scent of sweat and dirt clung to his clothes, evidence of his hard work in the fields. Rabbit claimed to be the great-grandchild of the legendary hero, Ban Tong. According to the legends, Ivalon was always besieged by giant creatures, and a hero of the time would rise to vanquish them. However, when their great-grandfather slew a monster in its sleep, it angered the deities, causing a catastrophic flood. The calamity forced their people to split into two tribes, the Kaliwa and the Canaan warrior tribes. As Rabbit continued his story, the warm breeze of the tropical air rustled through the trees and the sweet scent of blooming flowers filled the air. He revealed that his brother, Hoja, had made the life-changing decision to become a Satawa Damara and serve Kagyu Yuhan in Kingdom Ap 8, leaving Rabbit to take on the role of leading the Canaan tribe. As they journeyed, the sound of the tribe's footsteps echoed through the forest floor and the sun's rays shone down, casting a warm glow on the peaceful scene. Rabbit also shared with Alexis the reason behind his name, inspired by the unjust slaying of a beast, to remind his tribe that even the evilest of creatures should be confronted justly. Now, another colossal creatures are wreaking havoc in Ibalon. With a sense of urgency, Alexis, Hoja, and the warrior tribe led by Rabbit sprinted towards the battlefield, their feet pounding against the earth as they charged towards the area of battle. Lucky and Artemis Ha were standing on the bustling streets of the town about to go to the exit when they heard the Tagapag Balatar's announcement. The words boomed through the air, filling their ears with a sense of urgency. They could hear the rush of the crowd, their footsteps, and the sound of hushed whispers. Artemis Ha's eyes widened as she listened intently to the Tagapag Balatar's poetic description. "That's it, Lucky," Artemis Ha exclaimed, her voice rising with excitement. The first line from the poem, "From the tooth of a tower among men. Those giants are our first target. All we need to do is slay one and get its tooth." Lucky watched as other gamers hurried to the announced location of the battle, their footsteps echoing loudly in the distance. She turned to the artisan standing next to her and said, "It looks like we should head over there too. It might be a great opportunity for you to start your collection quest." Lucky and Artemis Ha ventured into the forest and were immediately taken aback by the stunning scenery. The towering trees reached up towards the sky, casting shadows that danced along the ground. The sound of rustling leaves and the chirping of birds filled their ears, creating a peaceful atmosphere. The scent of blooming flowers and fresh leaves wafted through the air, as they walked deeper into the forest. The cool breeze brushed against their skin, leaving a refreshing sensation in its wake. As they approached the small village, their senses were suddenly overwhelmed by a stark contrast. The smell of smoke and death filled their noses, causing their eyes to water. The sound of silence was deafening, a stark contrast to the forest's lively ambience. They could see the remains of what was once a bustling community, now reduced to rubble and ash. The ground was littered with fallen NPCs and destroyed buildings, marking the site of a devastating battle. Lucky noticed a gamer's bloodstain and a shattered sword, remnants of a fallen gamer, among the debris. Amidst the destruction, Lucky and Artemis Ha couldn't help but feel a sense of foreboding. The giant footprints on the soil, deep and menacing, were a testament to the power of the Anakims. Is this just a game event, or are these creatures truly overpowered? Artemis Ha inquired, looking around at the chaos. Lucky hadn't had time to answer because a chilling roar echoed through the air and halted any thoughts. The sound made Lucky and Artemis Ha freeze in fear. Slowly turning their heads, they found themselves face to face with an Anakim towering over them. The giant being's head was massive, with piercing yellow eyes that glinted in the sunlight. Its nose was broad and flat, with wide nostrils that flared with each breath. The creature's mouth was filled with razor-sharp teeth, and its breath reeked of decaying flesh from its unfortunate meal. The Anakim's body was covered in thick, matted hair, and its skin was a sickly grey colour as if it had never seen the light of day. It stood at least 10 feet tall, with long, muscular arms that hung down to its knees. The sound of its heavy footsteps shook the ground beneath Lucky and Artemis Ha's feet. As the Anakim spoke, its deep, rumbling voice sent shivers down their spines. "You there, are you strong enough to fight me?" Lucky could feel the creature's hot breath on her face, and the stench was overwhelming. Despite her fear, Lucky forced herself to stand tall and face the Anakim. After all, this is just a game, right? The Anakim raised its arms and launched an attack on Lucky and Artemis Ha. Yes, this is a game, but this felt so realistic she just wanted to run and hide. Artemis Ha used the skill Hypnotic Gaze in hopes to stun the Anakim, and it worked. Without hesitation, Lucky dashed forward, drawing her Chris dagger. The Anakim roared and swung its massive arm, but Lucky expertly dodged the attack and plunged her dagger into its flesh. The monster howled in pain as Lucky's attacks landed. Artemis Ha, standing behind Lucky, began activating a skill. The effect was immediate and the Anakim began to stumble and sway, confused by the Bihani's skill. Taking advantage of the distraction, Lucky leaped onto the Anakim's back, driving her dagger in deeper. The monster thrashed and roared, but Lucky held on tight, her body moving in perfect harmony with the Anakim's motions. Artemis Ha continued her skill casting, her hands moving in intricate patterns. Suddenly, a burst of light erupted from her palms, striking the Anakim and causing it to stumble. Lucky seized the opportunity and plunged her dagger deep into the monster's back. As soon as the duo thought they had gained the upper hand, the deafening roar of the Anakim pierced the air, signaling for reinforcements. In a matter of seconds, 3 more Anakims emerged from the shadows. As Lucky and Artemis Ha turned to face the sound of the Anakim reinforcements, they were met with a chilling sight. The first Anakim to approach was larger and more muscular than the one they previously fought, with rippling biceps and a towering presence that made the ground shake beneath his feet. His skin was rough and scaly, and his beady red eyes glinted with a fierce hunger. The stench of his breath was overpowering, like rotting meat mixed with sulfur, making Lucky and Artemis Ha nauseous. The second Anakim was even larger, towering over the other 2 and casting a menacing shadow. Its skin was a mottled shade of green and brown, with thick, powerful muscles rippling beneath it. Its eyes were a sickly yellow, glowing with an unnatural light that made Lucky and Artemis Ha shiver with fear. As it approached, the ground shook with each of its thunderous footsteps, like a small earthquake. The third Anakim was the most fearsome of all, with a body that seemed to be carved from solid rock. Its skin was a deep, obsidian black, and its eyes glowed with an otherworldly fire. Its movements were quick and graceful, belying its massive size, and Lucky and Artemis Ha could feel the heat radiating from its body as it drew closer. The 2 were caught off guard by the sudden arrival of the 3 larger Anakims. The first one taunted them with a wicked grin. "You thought you could beat us that easily? You're nothing but weaklings." The second Anakim, who seemed to have a gentler disposition, rushed to help his wounded comrade. "Let me take care of that wound for you," he said as he smeared some mud on the injured area. The first two then turned their attention back to the battle, lunging at Lucky and Artemis Ha with ferocity. The third Anakim remained still, watching the fight intently. As they fought, Lucky and Artemis Ha were quickly becoming overwhelmed by the Anakim's strength and agility. "We need to fall back," Lucky said to Artemis Ha, but the two Anakims were hot on their heels, following their every move. The sound of the Anakim's heavy footsteps reverberated through the forest, and the stench of their sweaty, musky bodies filled the air. Lucky and Artemis Ha could feel the heat emanating from the Anakim's bodies as they fought. "Stay focused," Artemis Ha yelled to Lucky as she used her charm skills to weaken the Anakim's attacks. "We can do this." But the duo knew they were in for a tough battle against these formidable foes. Artemis Ha's eyes darted around, frantically searching for a way out. Suddenly, her gaze fell upon three manticore nearby. She rummaged through her inventory and found her last blueberry cheesecake. She hesitated for a moment before making the decision to offer it to the beasts. As the manticore devoured the cheesecake, they let out a contented purr and began to follow Artemis Ha, ready to obey her every command. Artemis Ha held out her hand, and the manticore responded, moving to her side. The two Anakim reinforcements stepped forward, brandishing their massive fists. One of them reached down to grab a milk tea from the tail of a manticore, and the beast growled in response. The Anakim took a swig of the tea, and suddenly its eyes blazed with a new intensity. The other Anakim did the same, and the manticores began to growl and snarl and started an attack. The battle was fierce, the two Anakim trading blows with the manticores. The Anakim had raw power on their side, but the manticores were quick and nimble, and their sharp claws and teeth were deadly. The sound of flesh tearing and claws scraping against each other filled the air. Suddenly, one of the manticores went down, its body limp and lifeless. The Anakim had landed a powerful blow, its massive fist slamming into the beast's side. The second manticore was wounded, but still fighting fiercely. However, the Anakim was too strong, and too powerful. It grabbed the manticore in its powerful hands, lifting the beast up high and crushing its body. Artemis Ha and Lucky were in trouble. They quickly mounted the remaining manticore, hoping to escape the Anakim's wrath. Their mount was fast, but not fast enough. The Anakim quickly caught up, pounding the ground with each step. The two gamers held on tight, ducking and weaving as the Anakim tried to grab them. As they rode, the scent of sweat and blood from the manticores filled their nostrils, which is reminiscent of a wintermelon milk tea. They could feel the heat of the Anakim's breath on their backs, and the cold wind rushing past their faces. The sound of the Anakim's footsteps and the manticore's growls echoed around them. They reached a small clearing, and the manticore collapsed, exhausted and wounded. The Anakim closed in. Artemis Ha assisted the manticore as it drank its favorite drink to replenish some of its health. It stood preparing to protect its temporary master. The two gamers tensed up as they braced for the battle ahead. The manticore stood protectively beside them, its fur bristling with anticipation. The air was thick with the scent of sweat and fear, as the two Anakim advanced, their clawed feet sending tremors through the ground. With a savage snarl, the first Anakim lunged at the manticore, grabbing its tail and head, and twisting them in opposite directions. The sickening crunch of bones echoed through the clearing as the manticore slumped to the ground, its milk tea spilling out and mingling with the dirt. Artemis Ha's sobs filled the air, her distress palpable as she mourned the loss of their ally. Distracted by the heartbreaking scene, Artemis Ha didn't see the second Anakim until it was too late. The vicious blow landed squarely on her jaw, sending her sprawling to the ground. Lucky leaped forward, desperate to catch her friend, but the first Anakim was faster. Its massive hands closed around Lucky's arms, pinning her in place. The stench of blood filled her nostrils, as she struggled against its grip. Lucky's heart was pounding in her chest as the first Anakim's grip tightened around her arm. She winced as the second Anakim encircled his hands around her legs, effectively trapping her. The unbearable stench from the Anakims filled her nostrils, causing her to gag. She tried to struggle, but their grip on her was unbreakable. Artemis Ha weakly raised her head and let out a blood-curdling scream, causing the hairs on the back of Lucky's neck to stand up. The sight of the two Anakims playing tug-of-war with her body was horrifying. Lucky could feel the blood rushing to her head, and she knew that it was only a matter of time before her game avatar's body would break under the strain. Suddenly, there was a blinding flash of light that filled the air, temporarily blinding the gamers and the Anakims. Lucky shook her head, trying to clear her vision. As her eyes adjusted to the sudden brightness, she saw a male gamer standing in front of her. The sound of his shiny armor clanking was like music to her ears. She could see that he was an athletic Satawa Damara with a short sword at hand. His brown hair is tied neatly at the back of his head. She felt a sense of relief knowing that help had arrived. As the gamer Satawa Damara unleashed his lightning skills on the first Anakim, sparks crackled through the air, creating a sharp tangy scent. The clanging of metal echoed as his sword struck the second Anakim, sending metallic vibrations through the ground. A male Satawa Damara NPC ushered Lucky away from harm's way. The other NPC assisted Artemis Ha to stood up. When she is finally away from the area of the Anakims and the other gamers' battlefield, she pulled 2 healing potions from her inventory. Artemis Ha's healing potion had a sharp tang as she downed it quickly, feeling its warmth spread through her body. She handed the other potion to Lucky, its bitter taste lingering on her tongue. As Lucky swallowed the potion, she could feel a rush of energy coursing through her body. I think it is better to eat some boosters as well while that person deals with the Anakims, Artemis Ha mentioned as she prepared a feast of meal boosters in front of them. The booster they ate had a sweet, fruity flavor that gave them a burst of excitement and renewed vigor. Lucky was caught off guard by the sudden attack of the Anakims earlier. She quickly glanced at her right hand, removed the ring from her pinky finger, and felt the familiar sensation of her finger now unadorned. She swiftly stored it in her inventory, realizing that it was time to unleash the full extent of her abilities. With a newfound determination, she vowed to fight more seriously, no longer limiting her boosted stats. Lucky and Artemis Ha stood poised, their eyes locked on the Anakims as they prepared to rush to the aid of the other gamer in the heated battle. /end of chapter 10